I drove 600 miles to celebrate my first grandchild, but instead of joy, I faced betrayal. My daughter, Evelyn, had a security guard throw me out of her baby shower. Embarrassment, she called me, forgetting all I sacrificed, like co-signing her massive mortgage. My heart raced, feeling the weight of her words, and I knew. She was about to discover just how far I'd go to reclaim my dignity. What happens when a mother's love is met with such coldness? It's a question that lingers, much like the summer air heavy with jasmine as I drove. My name is Margaret Carter, and at 68, I was living proof of a mother's enduring love. My life had been simple, rooted in a small paid-off home in rural Pennsylvania. A world alive with the soothing sound of rustling leaves and the night chorus of crickets. Yet, much of my heart resided 600 miles away, in a pristine mansion nestled amongst affluent suburbs in Charlotte, North Carolina, where my only daughter, Evelyn, lived with her husband, Preston. Every dollar I earned as a nurse, every moment of my life, poured into making sure Evelyn had opportunities beyond the struggling life I once knew. She was my pride, my legacy. A radiant girl with dreams that seemed to stretch far beyond our small-town limits. Years ago, when she and Preston dreamed of their ideal home, a sprawling 6-bedroom symbol of success, the reality hit hard. They were over its head financially, trapped in a swirling sea of ambition and debt. I'll never forget the call. Evelyn's voice dripped with desperation, mingled with practiced sweetness. "Mama, it's perfect. The house, the neighborhood, everything we've ever wanted." Did I ever imagine I'd find myself at this crossroads during what should have been the happiest moment of my life? How did we end up here, at each other's throats, tangled in a web of expectations and disappointments? As I drove through the fragrant night, my resolve hardened. I would no longer be a silent player in this drama. Decisions would be made. Choices that would either bridge our divide or shatter it entirely. Evelyn was about to learn what it meant to be truly independent, and the depth of my sacrifice was no longer something to be taken for granted. What was the price of family loyalty, and how would the winds of change finally carry this story forward? The air in the kitchen felt thick, almost suffocating as Margaret Carter stood frozen, staring at the bank statement in her hands. The faint smell of burnt toast lingered, mixing with the weight of her decisions. Her heart pounded, each beat more intense than the last. She'd given everything, her time, her savings, her dreams, to ensure Evelyn had everything she needed. But now, Margaret was starting to wonder if she'd been a fool. From the living room came Evelyn's laughter, bright and carefree. But to Margaret it sounded hollow, like a mocking echo from a world that no longer had room for her. Her hands trembled as she looked at the numbers again. What if she knew the truth? The thought hit her like a bolt of lightning, sparking a fear that gripped her chest. What if this revelation tore their fragile bond apart? Would Evelyn ever understand, or would the truth shatter everything they'd built? The stakes had never been higher. Margaret knew the time had come to make a choice. For years, she'd been the silent giver, the one who sacrificed without complaint, hoping her daughter would one day see her worth. She had co-signed that massive mortgage, putting everything she had on the line to give Evelyn and Preston the life they wanted. But she wasn't prepared for the resentment that followed. Evelyn had stopped being grateful long ago. The house, the luxury, the lifestyle, it had all become a symbol of their success, not her sacrifices. Margaret's generosity was just part of the background noise of their perfect world, a utility they took for granted. Now, Margaret's only connection to her daughter was through the occasional phone call, polite and distant, filled with superficial pleasantries. Through social media, she watched as Evelyn flaunted her perfect life, dinner parties, exotic vacations, a happiness that had no room for an old woman from rural Pennsylvania. Margaret felt like a stranger in her own daughter's world. But then came the news. Evelyn was pregnant. Margaret's heart swelled with hope. A grandchild, a new life, a new beginning. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that could bring their fractured family back together. But the baby shower, the grand affair, would be another reminder of the divide between them. Would it be the start of healing, or would it only push them further apart? Margaret had already made so many sacrifices for her family. But the question now was simple. How much more was she willing to lose? The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as Margaret approached Evelyn's doorstep, the scent of fresh blooms mixing with the tension in the air. The crinkled gift bag, heavy with the promise of a mended relationship, felt like an anchor in her trembling hands. Yet her heart raced with uncertainty. Had enough time passed for forgiveness? Would Evelyn see the sacrifice behind the threads of that blanket? Just as she reached for the doorbell, a distant shout echoed. Was it anger or joy that awaited her inside? For days, Margaret had been planning this moment, her heart full of hope. A mother's love, a dream fulfilled in the form of a hand-knitted baby blanket. Soft, white, and woven with years of sacrifice. She hadn't been invited, not officially, but she knew, with the certainty of a mother's heart, her surprise would bring joy. The 600-mile drive was long, but Margaret's anticipation kept her going. The miles of Pennsylvania pine forests gave way to bustling North Carolina highways, and as she drove, memories of Evelyn's youth flooded her mind. She remembered the 16-year-old girl, full of dreams, with a fire in her eyes and a passion for art. Margaret had worked tirelessly, taking extra night shifts at the hospital just to send her to a summer arts program in New York. Evelyn's joy when she received the letter and the check for tuition was a look Margaret had treasured for over 20 years. Now, Margaret was on her way to surprise her daughter, to celebrate her grandchild, to finally be a part of their perfect world. But what awaited her was nothing like what she imagined. The sun shone brightly, the radio played her favorite old gospel hymns, and yet the blanket beside her was a symbol of something much heavier, unseen sacrifices, an unspoken truth. Would Evelyn embrace her, or would this gesture be lost in the distance that had grown between them? As Margaret approached the door, the question lingered. Could love heal a wound so deep? The laughter outside was bright, but as I stepped closer to the house, it felt like ice creeping up my spine. I froze. There she was, Evelyn Brooks, glowing in a vibrant dress, posing for pictures, her smile radiating like nothing had ever gone wrong. The scent of fresh flowers mixed with the air, but it couldn't hide the tension building in my chest. Tonight wasn't just any celebration. It wasn't about a new life coming into the world. No. Tonight was a show, a calculated display of wealth meant to overshadow everything I had ever sacrificed. The laughter, the music, the bright lights, they were all part of a world I had no place in anymore. I felt the weight of the years between us, the unspoken pain like confetti just waiting to explode. The door was wide open, but what awaited inside wasn't just joy. It was a battleground. A place where everything I had given for my daughter seemed forgotten. And I wasn't sure what hurt more, the life she was living now, or the love that seemed to have disappeared in the shadows of her ambition. I walked in, heart pounding, gift bag in hand, ready to heal the wound. But the moment I stepped inside, it was clear. I wasn't welcome. The house was a mansion, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Luxury everywhere. Foreign cars, white roses, towering balloons, champagne in every hand. It was a dream I couldn't afford to have. And there she was. Evelyn Brooks, in the middle of it all, radiant, happy. A far cry from the young girl I once knew, the one whose eyes sparkled with dreams of a better life. Now she was holding court, surrounded by wealthy strangers, and I was just a mother in a simple dress with a small gift, a stark contrast to the life she had built. Then she saw me. The smile on her face cracked. Horror. Pure horror flashed across her face. Her eyes widened and she took a step back, almost as if seeing a ghost. Before I could say a word, she rushed towards me, grabbing my arm, her voice sharp, angry, whispering with venom. "Mama, what are you doing here? You can't be here." I stood there, stunned, my heart sinking. "What? What do you mean? I drove all this way to surprise you, to be a part of your celebration." Her laugh was bitter, cutting through the silence. "A surprise?" she hissed, pulling me back onto the porch away from her guests. The weight of those words hit harder than anything I'd felt in years. What had I done? Was this the life I'd worked for? Had it all been worth it? The scent of freshly baked apple pie filled the air, wrapping Margaret Carter in a warm embrace of nostalgia. She stood in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, casting a golden glow on the worn wooden table where laughter and stories once flowed freely. Memories flooded back, her daughter, Evelyn Brooks, giggling as they baked together, flour dusting their faces like a playful badge of honor. But now, that laughter felt like a distant echo, replaced by the sharp sting of betrayal. The memory was bittersweet, a reminder of the bond they once shared, now overshadowed by ambition and conflict. Margaret took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. She had come to reclaim her dignity, to assert her worth, but the path ahead was fraught with tension. The door to Evelyn's lavish mansion stood wide open, inviting, yet foreboding. What awaited inside wasn't just joy, it was a battleground. The life Evelyn had built felt like a fortress, one that had forgotten the sacrifices Margaret had made. As she stepped inside, her heart raced. The mansion was a spectacle of luxury. Foreign cars lined the driveway, white roses adorned every corner, and laughter echoed like a cruel reminder of her absence. And there was Evelyn, radiant and surrounded by wealthy strangers, a stark contrast to the little girl who once dreamed of a better life. Then their eyes met. Evelyn's smile faltered, horror flashing across her face. "Mama, what are you doing here? You can't be here," she hissed, pulling Margaret aside, her voice sharp and angry. The words cut deeper than any knife. "I drove all this way to surprise you," Margaret replied, her voice trembling, but Evelyn's laugh was bitter, slicing through the air. "A surprise?" she spat, her disdain palpable. Margaret felt the heat of shame wash over her. She was an embarrassment, a country mother in a world that had no place for her. Just then, Evelyn's husband, Preston, appeared, his expression a mask of barely concealed fury. "Evelyn Brooks, handle this now," he commanded, and in that moment Margaret realized the truth. Evelyn had chosen him, her new life, over her own mother. "You have to leave, Mama," Evelyn said, her voice cold and devoid of love. The small nod she gave to the security guard standing by the door was a silent execution of their bond. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Margaret felt her heart shatter as he led her away, past the laughing guests who now stared with pity and scorn. She was being escorted out of her own daughter's baby shower like a common trespasser. The world she had known was collapsing around her, leaving only the bitter taste of betrayal and the haunting question. Was this the life she had worked for? Had it all been worth it? My mind was a slow-motion replay of my humiliation. The caterer's pitying glance as I walked by. The whispered comment from one of Evelyn's friends, "Oh my God, is that her mother?" And there was the final, triumphant look on Evelyn's face, standing on the porch, hand resting on her pregnant belly, watching me be led away like I was some unwanted trash. She'd done it. She'd eliminated the threat, the embarrassment, the country mother who dared to crash her perfect day. Sitting in my car, parked on that quiet suburban street for over an hour, I caught sight of the handmade baby blanket beside me. It felt like a pathetic reminder of the love I once hoped to share, now cruelly rejected. Laughter drifted from the party, a mocking symphony that roared in the silence of my shame. My heart, once overflowing with love and hope, was now cold and empty. The shock, the grief, the profound embarrassment, they swept over me like a tidal wave. But beneath that, something fierce and unexpected began to stir, a cold, quiet, and utterly ferocious fury. Evelyn's love? Just a performance, all my sacrifices met with the ultimate act of disrespect. I wasn't family to them. I was a liability to be discarded. That's when I remembered my power. I wasn't just a name in their lives. My name was on their mortgage. The woman they had just had escorted from their property was about to take everything back. The 600-mile drive back to Pennsylvania turned into a journey through a landscape of pure, unrelenting rage. The paralyzing shock of my public humiliation faded, replaced by a clarifying rage. The heartbroken mother crying in the car outside her daughter's party had vanished. She'd been replaced by a resolute woman of 68, a woman who had sacrificed it all, who had been cast aside as an embarrassment. And in that moment of realization, I understood. I had finally had enough. No more tears left to shed. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, my thoughts a frigid storm, relentless and unforgiving. Evelyn hadn't just uninvited me. She'd thrown me out, using a hired guard to enforce her will. My heart plummeted. This was the daughter I had nurtured, the daughter I sacrificed everything for. All those years spent pouring my love into raising her, only for her to choose the hollow approval of her snobby in-laws over me. Tacky. The word echoed in my mind, sharp as glass. My simple dress, my handmade gifts, my very existence, tacky. Each mile blurred by as I drove through the night, the sorrow morphing into something fierce, a plan beginning to take shape, cold and methodical. They wanted to reduce our relationship to a transaction. Fine. I'd respond in the only language that mattered to them: money. I recalled the mortgage. Years ago, I sat in the bank manager's community center, co-signing a document that forever linked my financial stability to their future. I was the bedrock, the guarantee beneath their lifestyle. Their cruel rejection just detonated that foundation. As dawn broke, I returned home, my body heavy with fatigue that ran deeper than exhaustion. It was the weariness of unrecognized love. But there would be no rest. I marched to my old metal file cabinet, the keeper of my life's worth. I pulled out the mortgage agreement, thick and imposing. Its weight felt like justice waiting to be served. And then, out of the swirling emotions, a moment flickered. A memory from Evelyn's childhood. I saw her as a small girl, fists clenched, bravely facing down a bully for me. That fierce spirit. Was it possible that her ambition was rooted in something deeper? A fear of inadequacy, not merely a hunger for wealth. It struck me, shifting the narrative, painting her in shades of vulnerability. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This was not just a daughter fighting for her dreams. This was a woman caught in a cycle of doubt and ambition. Perhaps I could use my strength, not to destroy her world, but to guide her back to the love we once shared. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of hope. I would reclaim my dignity and, in doing so, perhaps bridge the chasm that had formed between us. It was time to turn this family drama into a story of reconciliation. Would love win out over ambition? Only time would tell. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Margaret Carter stepped into her home community center, heart racing, the damp scent of rain drifting in through the window, mixing with the faint smell of old paper. She gripped the hefty mortgage agreement, its pages filled with dense legal jargon. Once, that wording had terrified her, but now, it felt like power. As she read the familiar lines, Something shifted within her. Suddenly, she wasn't just a co-signer buried under family obligations. No, she was the primary co-signer, the essential foundation for everything Evelyn and her husband had built. Her gaze fell on a specific clause, one she'd had painstakingly explained to her long ago. It was simple. If the relationship with the borrower, Evelyn, got irreparably damaged, Margaret could notify the bank and potentially destroy their financial fortress right before their eyes. Her heart thudded as the realization settled in. Wasn't it funny how her daughter had viewed her as a liability? Today, that perception would flip on its head. A slow, cold smile crept across her face. Evelyn and her husband had underestimated her. Oh, they would soon find out exactly what kind of liability she could be. As Sunday faded into a restless night, the weight of her choice felt heavier. She wasn't just mourning a lost connection, she was transforming. Gone was the mother who pined for her daughter's affection. In her place stood a woman with a diamond-hard resolve, ready to hold Evelyn accountable for the rift they shared. Monday dawned gray and cloudy. Margaret planned her next move with meticulous care. No confrontation. A quiet, anonymous hotel was her launching pad, and from there she would deliver the most devastating call of her life, the one that had the potential to crumble the very walls Evelyn had erected. As she stepped out, prepared for a battle of wills, she paused, listening to the soft rustle of leaves outside. Would this step bring her the dignity she sought, or would it fracture their fragile bond further? The uncertainty clawed at her heart. In that hushed moment, the gap between mother and daughter felt impossibly wide, laden with ambition, betrayal, and love. But the clock was ticking. Time could only tell how this family drama would unfold. Would hope flourish, or would ambition bury them all? The echoes of their past loomed large as she prepared to reshape their future. The phone call that would send their entire house of cards crashing down was about to begin. They had called security on me, but now it was my turn. I was ready to call the bank on them, and I knew my call would hit harder. Monday morning arrived, and I stepped into a quiet hotel in Pennsylvania, a city distant enough to cloak my identity, yet close enough to feel the pulse of home. As I sat in that sterile, clean room with the mortgage documents spread before me, my heart matched the calm, steady rhythm of distant rain against the window. The anger, the mourning, it was all behind me. Now, it was all business. At precisely 10 o'clock, I made the call, not to the general customer service line. I wasn't here to voice a complaint. I dialed the direct line to the risk management department, a number unearthed through careful investigation. Risk management, this is Sarah, a voice answered, professional yet slightly bored. Good morning, Sarah, I replied, my tone steady, my authority bubbling beneath the surface. My name is Margaret Carter. I'm calling to report a material change in circumstances regarding a mortgage on which I am the primary co-signer. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of keys tapping. Okay, Mrs. Carter, do you have the loan number? She asked. I responded with precision, reading the numbers directly from the document. I provided the property address in Charlotte. I rattled off my personal details, social security number, date of birth, every shred of information that validated my identity and legal standing. Yes, I have the account pulled up, Mrs. Carter. Sarah's tone still held that monotonous air. What seems to be the problem? The problem, Sarah, I said, my voice as cool as a winter morning, is that I am hereby formally withdrawing my financial and moral guarantee for this loan. The weight of that declaration hung heavy in the air, shattering the quiet tension like a lightning bolt. In that moment, I could almost hear the soft rustle of leaves outside, a reminder of the complexities within my heart. Was I ready for the consequences of this choice? The uncertainty clawed at me. The lines were redrawn, and the love beneath the anger set the stage for a confrontation no one saw coming. Would this decision bring back my dignity, or would it deepen the rift between Evelyn and me? The echoes of our past whispered in my mind. I was no longer just a mother pining for her daughter's affection. I was a force to be reckoned with. How would this family drama unfold? Would hope blossom, or would ambition bury us all? Only time would tell. The cold air rushed in through the open window, sending a chill down Margaret Carter's spine. Her heart pounded in her chest. For years, she'd been painted as the villain, the one who never understood, never listened. But today, everything was changing. As her eyes scanned the cluttered kitchen, a photo slipped from the counter, its edges frayed. It was of Evelyn, her daughter, tears in her eyes, a vulnerability Margaret had never seen before. "You never saw me," Margaret whispered to the empty room. It hit her like a storm. All the battles, all the anger, had only hidden the real wound beneath. The suffocating weight of her own sacrifices, unrecognized and forgotten. The story was never about who was right or wrong. It was about connection, something they'd both lost in the chaos. Margaret's decision had been a quiet storm, one that would change everything. She'd always supported Evelyn and her husband, co-signing their mortgage, believing in them despite all the warning signs. But now, it was clear she couldn't pretend anymore. The financial betrayal had grown too large to ignore. With a steady voice, she made the call. "I'm pulling my support," she told the bank, each word like a dagger slicing through years of loyalty. Her daughter had crossed a line, and Margaret would not stand by while everything she had built came crashing down. "Are you sure?" The voice on the other end was shocked, unsure, but Margaret stood firm. She had given everything to her daughter: love, trust, even her own financial stability. And what had she gotten in return? A public disgrace, a daughter who cast her out in front of everyone. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her worth. Silence lingered as the weight of Margaret's decision sunk in. The phone call ended, but the consequences were only just beginning. Evelyn's life, once carefully curated, would now unravel in ways neither of them could foresee. Would this fracture their already broken relationship even more? Or, just maybe, would it spark a chance for real healing? Only time would tell. Margaret Carter's hand trembled as she picked up the phone. The call from the bank had come just hours after her decision. Her decision to pull the rug out from under everything her daughter had built. The voice on the other end was steady, professional. Mr. Davenport, a senior vice president, his tone low and serious, asked her to recount the events once more. And Margaret did. Calm, collected, as if she wasn't about to tear apart her own blood. "Is this decision final?" he asked, his voice echoing the weight of the moment. "It is," Margaret replied. It was a quiet statement that, in that instant, set off a storm she had known was coming, but could never stop. The truth hit hard, sharper than any regret she'd carried. She had been more than just a co-signer. She had been their lifeline, her daughter, Evelyn, and her son-in-law, Preston. Without Margaret's pristine credit history, their dream home wouldn't exist. But Evelyn had crossed a line. And this wasn't about money anymore. This was about standing up, taking back her dignity. She could almost hear the shock in Mr. Davenport's voice when he said, "Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Carter. We'll review the loan agreement and take the necessary steps." The bank, ruthless in its efficiency, would unleash everything to protect its interests. Margaret knew it. She had known the moment she signed that loan, watching her daughter's dreams unfold before her. But now, Evelyn's beautiful, expensive life was about to come crashing down. Margaret wasn't proud of what she'd done, but it was necessary. The hurricane was coming. Evelyn and Preston had no idea just how close the storm was. They hadn't realized the foundation had already cracked, and Margaret, no longer willing to be their silent partner in this lie, had made it crumble. The bank's legal team would move fast, reviewing the application, digging through the numbers. They would see what Margaret had known all along. Evelyn and Preston were financially vulnerable, drowning in credit card debt, with no chance of surviving without her. Margaret had given everything, and in return she'd been publicly humiliated. She had been the villain, the one who couldn't understand, the one who never listened. But now, she was the one who had to reclaim her worth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue across the living room, Evelyn's laughter faded. The air grew thick with tension as she glanced at the letter. Her hands trembled. Would she tear it to pieces in denial, or would she brace herself to confront the storm brewing just outside her door? Her heart raced, a frantic drum echoing her mother's voice in her mind, whispering that reality waits for no one. What undeniable truth lay beyond the gleaming surface of her seemingly perfect life? They had no choice but to protect their investment. The bank invoked Clause 17B of the mortgage agreement, a dry legal term that now haunted my thoughts. It allowed them to demand the entire loan balance if anything unforeseen happened. A certified letter flew from the bank to Evelyn's beautiful Charlotte home on a quiet Thursday. I could almost envision the scene. Evelyn, still glowing from her successful baby shower, opened that ominous envelope as if it were just another boring piece of mail. But then she'd read the cold, hard, devastating truth that could shatter her world. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Monroe," it began, "due to a material adverse change in the conditions under which this loan was underwritten, specifically the formal withdrawal of support from your primary financial guarantor, we are invoking our rights under Clause 17B of your mortgage agreement. The full outstanding balance of your loan is now due and payable within 30 days. Failure to remit the full balance will result in the immediate initiation of foreclosure proceedings." The panic would have been swift and suffocating. The staggering sum of their mortgage loomed like an insurmountable mountain. In that moment, their dream home transformed from a sanctuary to a gilded cage. They were ensnared in a web of their own design. Evelyn, with all her ambitions, stood at the crossroads. Would she demand answers from Margaret, or would she spiral into chaos, letting the weight of each word crush her? This was no ordinary battle. It was a clash of pride, dreams, and the harsh reality of financial dependence. But the letter didn't end there. It contained a second, even more devastating paragraph, its implications hanging in the air like the scent of rain on a summer's eve. What brutal revelation awaited her next? Would it push Evelyn to confront Margaret, or pull them deeper into conflict, further unraveling the fragile bond between mother and daughter? As the silence settled, the stakes could not be higher. Would Evelyn have the strength to rise from the ashes, or would she be buried beneath the very dreams she sought to achieve? The answer felt tantalizingly close, yet devastatingly out of reach. Margaret Carter stood by the window, the last rays of the summer sun slipping through the curtains. A faint smell of lavender lingered in the air, a soft reminder of a time when her daughter's laughter filled this house. Now, silence hung like a heavy fog between them. The hum of the old kitchen clock was almost deafening in its solitude. Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the phone, knowing that once again her daughter's anger would weigh her down. But this time, something was different. "Hello, Mama." Her daughter's voice cracked like a shattered glass, raw and desperate. "The bank, they sent a letter. They're calling the loan due. They said you withdrew your support. What did you do? You've ruined us." Margaret let the silence stretch, letting her daughter's panic unfold. Her voice, steady and cold as a winter morning, replied, "I did nothing, Evelyn Brooks. I simply told the truth. Our family has fallen apart, and you made that perfectly clear when you had me escorted from your home." Evelyn Brooks stammered, her voice cracking. But that was just a misunderstanding. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Was it? She let the question hang in the air. "You made your choice. You chose your fancy life over your own mother. Now, you'll face the consequences." The weight of the words sank in. Evelyn Brooks's world was crumbling, and for once, Margaret felt no sympathy. "But we'll be homeless," Evelyn Brooks wept. Margaret's tone didn't waver. "That does sound like a problem. Maybe you should talk to your husband. He seems full of financial solutions." And with that, Margaret hung up the phone, her hand as steady as it had ever been. The tension between them was no longer just about money. It was about broken promises, broken trust, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Margaret had given everything: her love, her support, her sacrifice. But Evelyn Brooks? She had chosen a life where Margaret no longer belonged. Now, as the phone call ended, Margaret stood tall in the stillness, the weight of her choices settling into her bones. Would Evelyn Brooks rise from the ashes of her own making, or would the dreams she clung to destroy her? In this battle there would be no winners. Only the bitter truth. The house of cards they had built on my love and sacrifice was crumbling. I was labeled the liability, but I had just called their loan due. What I found satisfying wasn't one dramatic act of revenge, but the agonizing unraveling of my daughter's life. The bank demanded immediate repayment or a new mortgage, a death sentence they couldn't escape. Panic settled over them like an unwelcome fog. They couldn't pay off the mortgage. Their attempts to refinance were humiliating failures, riddled with worries about dwindling incomes and daunting credit card debt. No bank would touch them. The unavoidable truth loomed. They had to sell their dream home. Fast. Their sprawling house in that posh Charlotte suburb, the very same place where I had been banished, now sported an ugly "for sale" sign, a public monument to their own greed. I savored hearing from old friends about their unraveling. The important social circles they desperately clung to began to fade away, unwilling to associate with the stench of financial failure. Their marriage, once glittering on shared ambition, fractured under the crushing weight of their new reality. Arguments echoed through their empty halls, words sharp and bitter. They called me, of course. Begged, pleaded, threatened. Did they think their desperation could reverse what had happened? Would they finally understand the true cost of their choices? Their lives, like glass, shattering under pressure, left me both wary and strangely vindicated. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that whispered secrets of betrayal, I stood at my door. The weight of Evelyn Brooks's dreams pressed against my chest. Could I reclaim my dignity? A heavy silence filled the air, fraying the tension between us. Would the bond between mother and daughter bend, or would it finally break? They promised to change. They offered apologies that were as hollow and as worthless as their own financial statements. "Mama, please." Evelyn Brooks had wept into the phone one night. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you'll co-sign again. We'll lose everything. I had listened to her pathetic self-serving pleas, and I had felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. Only the cold, hard satisfaction of a lesson well taught. "I am sorry, Evelyn Brooks," I had replied, my voice calm, final, "but I am no longer financially entangled with you or your husband. I have withdrawn my support permanently. I wish you the best," and then I had blocked her number. My revenge was complete. It had not been a messy, emotional confrontation. It had been a quiet, clinical, and devastatingly powerful phone call. I had not crashed their party. I had, with a single strategic move, foreclosed on their entire fraudulent life. I never saw them again. They sold the house at a loss. Their dreams of a massive profit turned to dust. The last I heard, they had divorced, their partnership of greed, unable to survive the harsh reality of their own consequences. And me, I stayed in my small, quiet home in Pennsylvania. My peace restored, my dignity reclaimed. My revenge was not in their ruin, but in my own quiet, unshakable strength. I had been deemed an embarrassment, a liability, a woman to be escorted from the premises. But in the end, I was the one who held the deed, the one who held the power, the one who had with a single devastating phone call proven that a mother's love when betrayed can be a liability of a very, very different kind. And that was a truth that was worth more than any house, any amount of money.